When it comes to virtual reality, people tend to have pretty strong opinions. A lot of fans out there are pretty big on VR, but many others question whether VR technology can truly succeed in the current video game industry, which is exactly why the topic of this video is so damn controversial. To set things up a bit here, earlier in the year, Howard revealed that Bethesda was working on 3 new projects that were, and I quote, different from anything Bethesda had ever done before. In a recent interview, Todd Howard revealed even more about these projects and discussed how they might be related to VR. We're exploring some things in VR, we'll see where that heads. We don't want to talk about it quite yet until we figured some things out. Now, as you might imagine, Howard's words have caused quite a bit of stir in the Bethesda fandom. Specifically, since The Elder Scrolls 6 is likely to be the next Bethesda game in line, a ton of people have been claiming that The Elder Scrolls 6 will provide a virtual reality experience. Now, there are a ton of different things to talk about with regards to this claim, but let me start by discussing whether or not I think a VR Elder Scrolls game is actually gonna happen. Then, I'll discuss whether or not I think it's actually a good idea for the Elder Scrolls series. First of all, for those of you who aren't convinced that The Elder Scrolls 6 is in development yet, recall that in the past Todd Howard has gone on record saying that they've started working on the next installments for their series immediately after a game is released. In other words, they started light work on Skyrim immediately after Oblivion was released, started working on Fallout 4 immediately after Fallout 3, and so on. So it's likely that Elder Scrolls 6 development is in a pretty heated phase at this juncture. With this in mind, I want to emphasize the word exploring that was used by Howard in this interview, since it indicates that Bethesda is only experimenting with VR at this point. And the fact that they're still experimenting means they definitely aren't ready to begin developing a game with VR as of yet. The point I'm trying to make here is that Bethesda is probably too deep into Elder Scrolls 6 development at this point to integrate VR. Given that the game is right in the middle of development, if they've only begun experimenting with VR, then it's too late to take advantage of VR technology for ES6. However, if we're talking about Elder Scrolls 7 or Fallout 5, it's a completely different story. My prediction here is that the Elder Scrolls 6 will not take advantage of VR technology, but the Elder Scrolls 7 and possibly even Fallout 5 will take advantage of it. The thing is, I'm not so sure if it's all that great an idea in the first place. I am personally a bit negative on VR when it comes to the Elder Scrolls for a couple of key reasons. First off, Elder Scrolls games are insanely big and very complex, which means that integrating them with VR technology is going to be very difficult. Unfortunately, the only way they could really go about it is by sacrificing some elements normally in Elder Scrolls games, which means that if the Elder Scrolls 6 were integrated with VR technology, it would likely be dumbed down a lot. Elder Scrolls 7 might be a slightly different story, since that's a long way off, and at the time of development, Bethesda will probably have a lot more tools at their hands, but the idea still applies to even ES7 to some extent. Look, as amazing as VR may sound, I'm a little worried that Bethesda will sacrifice depth and breadth in their games in order to take advantage of VR technology. This issue is only made worse by the fact that Bethesda is an incredibly small company, as small as 1/10 the size of other development teams out there. One way they could remedy this is by expanding and hiring more employees, but I have a slight problem with this on grounds that, in my opinion, Bethesda makes such good games precisely because they're so unique as a small company. I would argue that because they're so small, they're more tight-knit, which allows them to communicate better and make one-of-a-kind games. So ultimately, this is why I'm a little ambivalent on the whole VR thing, but at the same time I could definitely be proven wrong, and perhaps all this will end up working out. Well, alright folks, that is pretty much gonna do it for this video. As always, if you enjoyed, be sure to drop me a like down below and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already for more Elder Scrolls content in the future. The comment question of the day is twofold here. For one, do you think Elder Scrolls 6 will take advantage of VR technology? And for two, do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? Otherwise, I hope you all have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video.